The first time Victor made a snide comment about my husband, I let it slide. Family dinners were already tense enough without me causing a scene. So, Ethan, Victor leaned forward, swirling his glass of Cabernet as if inspecting liquid gold. You're still working at that coffee shop, right? What's it called again? Perky Beans. Morning Brew, Ethan replied with that calm smile I'd fallen in love with. And yes, I'm still there. Fascinating, Victor said, his voice dripping with condescension. You know, when I was your age, I was already managing a team of 20 people, but I suppose someone has to make the lattes. My mother, Diana, shot me an apologetic glance across the table. Victor, please pass the potatoes. I squeezed Ethan's hand under the table. We'd only been dating for 6 months, but I already knew he was the one. What I didn't know was how much worse my stepfather's behavior would get. Victor Hampton had entered our lives when I was 16, sweeping my mother off her feet with his charisma and promises of financial security after my father's death left us struggling. At first, I was grateful for the stability he brought, the beautiful home, the private school, the college tuition. But as the years passed, I began to see through the veneer to the arrogant, judgmental man beneath. I'm actually taking courses in finance and banking, Ethan added, his voice even. Morning Brew has flexible hours which helps with my studies. Victor barely acknowledged the statement. Finance, ambitious. Though I've found that theory and practice are worlds apart. You need connections in that industry. It's all about who you know. I wanted to point out that Victor hadn't exactly built his commercial real estate business from nothing. He'd inherited it from his father. But I bit my tongue. It wasn't worth it. Not tonight. Little did I know that this dinner was just the beginning of a pattern that would test my patience, my relationship, and ultimately reveal truths none of us were prepared for. You look beautiful, Ethan whispered, adjusting his bow tie as we prepared to walk down the aisle. Our wedding day had finally arrived, and despite the stress of planning and family politics, nothing could dampen my happiness. So do you, I replied, straightening his boutonniere. I can't believe we're actually doing this. Having second thoughts, he raised an eyebrow, but I could see the flicker of vulnerability behind his joking expression. Never, you're stuck with me forever, Mr. Lawrence. The ceremony was perfect, intimate, emotional, exactly what we wanted. The reception, however, was where Victor's true colors shone through once again. As we moved around the room greeting guests, I spotted Victor cornering Ethan near the bar. From Ethan's tight smile and stiff posture, I knew something was wrong. I excused myself from a conversation with cousins and headed their way. Just concerned about my stepdaughter's future, Victor was saying. This economy isn't kind to people without solid careers. Serving coffee isn't exactly the foundation for providing the lifestyle she's accustomed to. I slipped my arm through Ethan's. What are we discussing? Victor smiled broadly, as if he hadn't just been insulting my husband. Just sharing some fatherly wisdom with Ethan here. Business advice. Victor seems concerned about your financial future with me, Ethan said, his voice steady but his eyes revealing his hurt. Well, then Victor should remember that I make my own money, and Ethan and I have our own plans that don't involve handouts, I replied sweetly. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to cut the cake. As we walked away, Ethan squeezed my hand. You didn't have to defend me. I'll always defend you. He has no right to talk to you like that. He's just trying to protect you. No, he's being a snob. There's a difference. Despite Victor's behavior, we refused to let him ruin our day. We danced, laughed, celebrated with friends and family who genuinely supported us. And when we left for our honeymoon, I put Victor's comments out of my mind, determined to focus on our new life together. 3 years flew by. Ethan and I settled into a comfortable routine in our modest apartment across town from my mother and Victor. I built my career as a graphic designer, while Ethan continued working at Morning Brew and pursuing his studies. What Victor didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that Ethan had graduated with honors the previous year and had quietly secured a position at First National Bank. He hadn't made a big announcement about it, preferring to let his work speak for itself rather than boast about titles or salaries. I respected his decision, though part of me wished he would throw his success in Victor's face the next time my stepfather made a disparaging comment about coffee shop employment. The opportunity came sooner than expected. My phone rang one Tuesday afternoon while I was finishing a client project. "Natalie, it's Mom." Her voice sounded strained. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" "Yes, well, not exactly. Victor's business is facing some challenges, and he's hosting a dinner party for potential investors this Friday. I was hoping you and Ethan could come." "Mom, you know how Victor treats Ethan. Why would we subject ourselves to that?" She sighed. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry, but this is important. Victor's company is in trouble, though he'd never admit it. Having family there would help present a united front." "He's not my family if he can't respect my husband," I said flatly. "Please, Natalie, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, and," she hesitated, "I miss you." That was a low blow. My mother knew exactly how to tug at my heartstrings. "Fine, we'll come. But if Victor says one condescending thing to Ethan, we're leaving." "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll make sure Victor behaves." After hanging up, I called Ethan at work. To my surprise, he wasn't opposed to attending. "Actually," he said, "I think we should definitely go." "Really, after how he's treated you?" There was a pause on the line. "Trust me on this one, Nat. I have a feeling it might be educational for everyone involved." Something in his tone made me curious. "Ethan Lawrence, what aren't you telling me?" "Nothing bad, I promise, just let's go to the dinner, dress nicely, and maybe bring some popcorn." "Popcorn?" "For the show," he said mysteriously. Victor and my mother's house was exactly as I remembered it. Imposing, immaculately decorated, and cold despite the expensive heating system. The kind of place designed to impress rather than welcome. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed several luxury cars already parked. "You ready for this?" I asked Ethan, squeezing his hand. He smiled, adjusting his tie. "More than you know." My mother greeted us at the door, pulling me into a tight hug before embracing Ethan. "Thank you both for coming. Victor's in the living room with the guests. Please be on your best behavior," she whispered the last part. "Shouldn't you be telling that to Victor?" I replied. She gave me a pleading look. "Natalie, please, his business is on the line." We followed her into the living room, where Victor was holding court with 4 men in expensive suits. He barely acknowledged our arrival with a curt nod before continuing his conversation. "As I was saying, gentlemen, this expansion represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The market is primed for this kind of development." My mother touched his arm. "Victor, Natalie, and Ethan are here." He turned, plastering on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, there's my stepdaughter and her husband. Come in, come in. Let me introduce you to some real movers and shakers in the business world." I felt Ethan tense beside me, but he maintained his composure as Victor introduced us. "This is Bill Freeman and Sam Gray, potential investors in Hampton Development's newest project. And this is James Carlton, my attorney." Handshakes were exchanged, pleasantries offered. "And what do you do, young man?" Bill asked Ethan. Before Ethan could answer, Victor cut in. "Ethan works at a coffee shop. It's very quaint." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. "Actually," Ethan began, but Victor was already steering the conversation elsewhere. "Can I refresh anyone's drink? James, more scotch." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Victor, you didn't let Ethan finish." Victor waved dismissively. "We all know what baristas do, Natalie. No need for details." Now Bill was asking about the projected returns on the riverfront property. The conversation continued, with Victor alternating between pitching his business venture and subtly undermining Ethan whenever possible. Each time Ethan tried to join the conversation, Victor would interrupt or redirect, ensuring he remained sidelined. "The financing is nearly secured," Victor was saying. "We're just waiting on the final approval from the bank, which should be a formality at this point. I've been working with First National for 20 years. Ethan caught my eye and gave me a small smile that I couldn't quite interpret. It wasn't his usual patient endurance of Victor's behavior. There was something else there. Anticipation. The doorbell rang. My mother excused herself to answer it, returning moments later with a distinguished-looking man in his 50s. "Victor, Thomas Brennan is here from First National." Victor's face lit up. "Thomas, excellent timing. Gentlemen, this is the branch manager at First National who's been handling my loan application." Thomas shook hands around the room, pausing when he reached Ethan. Ethan, I didn't expect to see you here. Victor's smile faltered. You know each other. Thomas looked confused. Of course, we work together. The room fell silent. I could practically hear the gears turning in Victor's head as he tried to process this information. There must be some misunderstanding, Victor said with a forced laugh. Ethan works at a coffee shop. Not for the past year he hasn't, Thomas replied. Ethan's our senior loan officer. In fact, that's why I'm here. We need his signature to finalize your loan approval. The crystal glass Victor was holding slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. All eyes were on Ethan, who stood calmly amid the sudden tension. Senior loan officer, Victor repeated, his face draining of color. Yes, Thomas confirmed. One of our best. Your application actually crossed his desk last week. Didn't you know your son-in-law works at the bank? Victor's eyes darted to me, then back to Ethan. No, I didn't. I tried to tell you, Ethan said quietly. Several times, actually. I stared at my husband, trying to process this revelation myself. He'd told me about his promotion to loan officer, yes, but senior loan officer. With the authority to approve or deny Victor's loan, that was news to me too. Victor seemed to be struggling to breathe. Can we discuss this in my study, privately? Of course, Ethan agreed. He turned to me. Nat, this won't take long. As they left the room with Thomas, an uncomfortable silence fell over the remaining guests. My mother looked as shocked as I felt. Did you know? She whispered. I shook my head. Not all of it. I knew he worked at the bank, but not that he was handling Victor's loan. Bill Freeman cleared his throat. Well, that was unexpected. Victor spoke so dismissively of your husband, we assumed he was, well, not someone with the power to approve or deny a multi-million-dollar loan. I finished for him. That's my husband for you. He doesn't brag about his accomplishments. Unlike some people we know, my mother murmured, surprising me with her candor. 20 minutes later, the study door opened. Thomas emerged first, nodded to me with a smile, and excused himself from the party. Victor and Ethan followed shortly after. The change in Victor was striking. Gone was the arrogant, domineering figure who had belittled my husband for years. In his place stood a humbled man, his shoulders slightly slumped, his expression chastened. Everything sorted out? Bill asked, breaking the tension. Victor cleared his throat. Yes, thanks to Ethan, we've reached an agreement that will allow the project to move forward, albeit with some additional oversight from the bank. That's generous of you, Sam Gray remarked, eyeing Ethan with newfound respect. Ethan shrugged. It's my job to make sound financial decisions for the bank. This project is viable with the right guardrails in place. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The investors seemed satisfied with whatever arrangement had been reached, and conversation gradually returned to normal, though Victor remained uncharacteristically subdued. As we prepared to leave, Victor pulled Ethan aside. I hovered nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. I owe you an apology, Victor said, his voice low but clear enough for me to hear. For tonight and for a lot of things. Apology accepted, Ethan replied simply. The loan terms, they're fair, more than fair considering. Considering how you've treated me, Ethan supplied. That has nothing to do with it. I assessed your application on its merits, Victor, that's all. Victor nodded slowly. I misjudged you completely. You judged me based on a job title, not on who I am. That's the problem. With that, Ethan rejoined me, and we said our goodbyes. As we drove home, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind all evening. Why didn't you tell me you were a senior loan officer, or that you were handling Victor's loan? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. I did tell you about the promotion. As for Victor's loan, I only found out last week. Client confidentiality meant I couldn't say anything specific, but when your mom called about the dinner, I knew it would all come out anyway. So you let me walk in there completely unprepared. He glanced at me, a hint of remorse in his eyes. I'm sorry about that. I guess part of me wanted to see the look on your face when Victor finally had to recognize who I really am. It was selfish. I sat with that for a moment. Was it satisfying seeing him realize? A small smile played on Ethan's lips. I won't lie, there was a certain poetic justice to it, but I didn't do anything to hurt him, Nat. His loan application was actually solid. I just added some conditions to protect the bank and him really from his tendency to overextend. You're a better person than me. I might have denied it out of spite. That's why you're not a loan officer, he teased. I leaned back in my seat, processing everything that had happened. So what exactly went down in that study? 1 hour earlier, Ethan followed Victor and Thomas into the study, noting how the usually confident Victor now moved with uncertainty, like a man crossing thin ice. The room was a shrine to Victor's ego. Awards, photos with prominent business figures, expensive art selected more for price tag than appreciation. Victor closed the door behind them and immediately went for the crystal decanter on his desk. Drink, he offered, his hand trembling slightly. No, thank you, Ethan replied. Thomas also declined. Victor poured himself a generous measure anyway. So Ethan, senior loan officer, that's quite impressive. Thank you, Ethan said simply. And my loan application. Thomas interjected. As I mentioned, we need Mr. Lawrence's final approval. All the paperwork is in order, but given the size of the loan. I've reviewed it thoroughly, Ethan said, opening his briefcase and retrieving a folder. The application has merit, but there are concerns about the debt-to-income ratio and the aggressive timeline. Victor's face tightened. I've never defaulted on a loan. True, Ethan acknowledged. But your company's financials show a concerning trend over the past 18 months. Cash flow is tightening. A temporary situation, Victor insisted. Perhaps, but my responsibility is to ensure the bank's interests are protected. Victor drained his glass. Are you going to deny my loan because of personal issues? Ethan's expression remained professional. I'm offended you would even suggest that. My personal feelings have nothing to do with this assessment. Then what are you proposing? Conditional approval, Ethan said, sliding the folder across the desk. With quarterly reviews, a phased disbursement schedule tied to construction milestones, and a slightly higher interest rate to offset the risk profile. Victor flipped through the documents, his face unreadable. These terms are standard for a loan of this nature with your current financial situation, Thomas supplied. Actually, quite favorable considering. Victor looked up, meeting Ethan's eyes directly for perhaps the first time. Why? Why what? Why help me at all after how I've treated you? Ethan leaned forward. Because this isn't about you and me, Victor. It's about my wife, your stepdaughter. It's about her mother who would be affected if your business failed. It's about making a sound financial decision that protects everyone involved. Victor sat heavily in his chair. I've been a fool. About some things, yes. The loan terms, I accept them. Ethan nodded. Good. Thomas will handle the paperwork. First disbursement should be available within 10 business days. As they prepared to leave the study, Victor spoke again. Ethan, wait. He took a deep breath. For what it's worth, I am sorry, truly. Ethan paused at the door. Prove it, not to me, to Natalie. She deserves a stepfather who respects her choices. And that's what happened, Ethan concluded as we pulled into our apartment complex. I sat in silence, absorbing his story. So you essentially saved his business while also putting him in his place. I did my job, Ethan corrected. The loan makes sense with proper oversight, and if it helps Victor learn something about judging people based on appearances or job titles, that's a bonus. I leaned over and kissed him. You're incredible, you know that. I do now, he grinned. The aftermath of what we came to call the glass incident unfolded gradually over the following months. Victor called Ethan the very next day to go over the loan conditions in more detail, a conversation that was strictly professional but notably lacking Victor's usual condescension. 2 weeks later, my mother invited us for dinner. I was hesitant, but Ethan encouraged me to accept. She's caught in the middle, Nat, and if Victor is genuinely trying to change, we should give him the chance. The dinner was awkward but civil. Victor asked thoughtful questions about Ethan's career path, actually listening to the answers. When Ethan mentioned a financing strategy he'd developed for first-time homebuyers, Victor seemed genuinely impressed. That's innovative thinking. Have you considered expanding it to commercial applications? And just like that, they were engaged in a real conversation about finance and business strategy as equals. By the third family dinner, something resembling respect had begun to form between them. Victor even consulted Ethan about a potential investment opportunity, valuing his professional opinion. The student becomes the teacher, I whispered to my mother as we watched them huddled over spreadsheets in Victor's study. She squeezed my hand. Your father would be proud of you, you know, standing by Ethan all this time. It wasn't hard, he's worth standing by. 6 months after the dinner party, Victor's project broke ground. Ethan and I attended the ceremony, where Victor publicly acknowledged Ethan's role in making the development possible. None of this would be happening without the financial expertise and guidance of my son-in-law, Ethan Lawrence, he announced to the gathered crowd. Sometimes the most valuable business lessons come from unexpected sources. Later at the reception, Victor pulled me aside. I owe you an apology too, Natalie. For underestimating you, and Ethan, for thinking I knew better about your life than you did. I studied him, searching for signs of the arrogant man I'd known for years. He seemed genuinely changed, humbled but not broken, more authentic somehow. What changed your mind? I asked, really. He considered this, seeing Ethan in his element that night, realizing that while I was judging him for pouring coffee, he was building a career more impressive than I knew. It made me question other assumptions I've made. Better late than never, I suppose. Can we start fresh, all of us? I thought about the years of snide comments, the dismissive attitude, the hurt he'd caused. But I also thought about my mother, caught between us, and about Ethan, who'd found it in himself to help Victor despite everything. We can try, I said finally, but it's a two-way street, Victor. He nodded solemnly. I understand and thank you. As I rejoined Ethan, watching Victor make his way back to the other guests, I reflected on how quickly fortunes could change, how a single moment of revelation could shatter years of preconceptions like a falling crystal glass. Happy? Ethan asked, sliding his arm around my waist. Getting there, I replied, leaning into him. You know, when we met, I never imagined you'd end up saving my stepfather's business empire. He chuckled, and I never imagined I'd want to. Life's funny that way. Over the next year, the dynamics of our family continued to evolve. Victor's business flourished under the structured oversight that Ethan had established. My mother seemed happier, relieved that the tension between her husband and daughter had eased. And Ethan received a promotion to vice president of commercial lending, an achievement that Victor celebrated by hosting a dinner in his honor. As for me, I found unexpected peace in the resolution of this long-standing conflict. The revenge I'd secretly craved for years, seeing Victor finally recognize Ethan's worth, had come about not through malice or manipulation, but through Ethan simply being himself, competent, ethical, and kind. Sometimes justice arrives in ways we never anticipate. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about destroying someone else's happiness, but about finding your own, and maybe, if you're lucky, helping others find theirs along the way. The glass that shattered that night in Victor's living room marked the breaking of more than crystal. It broke the barriers of pride and prejudice that had divided our family for too long. And from those broken pieces, we built something stronger together.